Hey, Adam, we are live.
Yeah. Hey, it's like some ways halfway over.
I know. Oh, there's something on my screen. Welcome to the Saratoga Podcast, everybody. Happy Wednesday and happy almost end of July. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Yep. We're
It's
getting
crazy.
into the heart of racing season.
I know. And it's been a minute. We've had a crazy July, but I'm so happy to have you join us today. And Dan should be on with us in a second. He's having some IT issues, as Dan has. So we'll probably give him a little grief about that. But he should be on with us in a minute. And I know we have a lot to talk about because it's been a minute.
Yeah. What do you want to start with?
I mean, there's so much. So there was a city council meeting last week, and there was a couple things on there that I definitely wanted to talk about. So should we just dive right in?
Let's jump on in.
All right, cool. So one of the first things, there was a couple presentations, and this sounds a little maybe dry off the top, but I actually think it's kind of an interesting one. There's always been a lot of complaints from the neighborhood around the high school that the high school students who are driving to school are parking in their neighborhood and creating a lot of issues. Oh, wait, I think we might have Dan. Hold on. Dan, is that you?
We are alive, aren't we? Look at that.
Hey, look at you. Dan, the three of us back together. Yay, I'm applauding.
Yes. It's when was the last time that happened? April?
I know. Wait, Dan, I like your summer stubble.
I was looking closer, Dan. All right.
Is that your vacation, Dan? Look, I love it.
Yeah. I'll, by the Travers, I'll shave it off. But for now, I'm. This is my midsummer grooming, we'll call it.
I'm digging it, Dan. So we just we dove right into the last city council meeting, and we'd started off talking about the parking issue around the high school and the neighborhoods around the high school. They had a bunch of neighbors come in to do a presentation talking about how a lot of the high school students, park in all these kind of residential neighborhoods around the high school because I guess there isn't enough parking at the high school, and how it's really become an issue. Long story short, the council voted 5-0 to impose 2-hour parking limits in a lot of these residential streets around the high school. And on its face, I know it seems like a little bit of kind of like a dry topic, but I actually think it's kind of an interesting one because I don't know what all these kids are necessarily going to do come September and going back to school with a 2-hour parking limit. I don't know. Maybe this is only interesting to me.
No, I was at a city council meeting a few months back when some residents came in and basically complained and pointed out the problems that they dealt with. I was hoping some of it was untrue because some of it was kind of, vulgarities and littering and things like that. And then that was a shame. It's not just simply parking. This is what they alleged. I don't know. I don't live there. But I drove to high school. I think my last 2 years of high school. But it's a privilege, right? You can still take the bus.
Yeah.
They're not obligated to give you parking, right? They're offering buses.
Well, I mean, I guess the question was, that high school's been there for a long time, right? Have high school kids always been parking there? Is this something they knew about when they bought their homes, right? And so that's the issue I would have. Is I understand the concerns. If I wouldn't want a bunch of high school kids, I can imagine there's just some awkward moments because we were all high school kids once. Some of us, like myself, weren't the best kids. I wouldn't want 17-year-old me posting up in front of my house. But then again, was this the rule when they bought the homes? Because if it was, it's kind of like, you get what you get.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know. I just think basically more kids need to be like carpooling, essentially. But I also think that, sorry, I have a loud fire truck going by. I also think that this just kind of pushes the problem further out into the neighborhood, probably, because I doubt that kids are going to be like, okay, you know what, let's just carpool now, or like, I'll take the bus now. I doubt that that's going to happen. I doubt that they're going to, they can't come out every 2 hours and move their car. That's obviously impossible. As far as I know, I don't really know what high school schedules are like, but I can imagine that's probably going to be impossible. Right. So they're either just going to get tons of tickets or they're going to just move further out into the residential neighborhood. So I'm not sure this is necessarily going to be an effective solution unless you're working with the high school to come up with like a tangible solution for the overflow.
Right. Are they simply displacing the problem to a different neighborhood, right?
Yeah, that would be my concern. So I was kind of surprised that they voted, so quickly and passed it. But, happy for the neighbors, I suppose.
I got a real funny parking story real quick about what's going on right now. So my mother lives in the core of the city, and the street that there is on-street parking. It's a street it's a busier street, so usually people don't. But the house close to her has been being remodeled, and it's been being remodeled for it seems like years now. And they're going full steam now. They all have these work trucks now that are parked in front of my mom's house. So she got fed up with it. So she started taking all her debris and making like a stick fortress in the road. And then like they would have parked there, like every 2 days, like DPW comes and scoops it up. And so she's got to go cut down more trees and stuff to make her little fortress. So it's this ongoing battle. And it's just, it's cute. I love you, Ma. I love you for doing it. And hopefully this construction sounds better. But it is like annoying to have people parking in front of your house, all the time. But Mom didn't sign up for it when she bought her house. I don't know if these residents did, but that would be my thought.
Adam, I think I have observed that because I drive by your mom's house all the time, and I think I have observed that.
Yeah, that element. Yard debris, drop them off.
That is so funny. Oh my God.
Let me just say, generally, this issue proves time and time again, like the Grand Avenue sidewalks, the school parking, even some of the BLM issues that some may agree or disagree with. But in this city, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you organize and you approach city council and you're determined and you've got numbers, your problem will likely be addressed.
The mayor actually said, and I didn't know this, that I guess if you have like 5 or more people that have an issue or a complaint, or you want to make some kind of presentation to the city council, if you have 5 or more people, they'll carve out time for you to make a presentation before the city council meeting on whatever that issue is, which I didn't know that was like an option necessarily. So that's an interesting thing for people to know. And by the way, guys, as we're having these conversations, we do have a call-in number, which is kind of a new thing for us. We're testing it out. So if you have any comments or questions about what we're talking about, feel free to call in and comment, join the conversation. So I'll leave that number up for a few minutes while we keep going. So that was one of the presentations. And as I said, they voted 5-0. They passed it. These 2-hour restrictions will go into place. And then one of the other presentations that was really interesting, and I actually have a question for Dan about, is the Downtown Advisory Committee did an update. And if you guys recall, this Downtown Advisory Committee was formed after the November shooting on Broadway. And it's comprised of downtown bars and restaurants, primarily bar owners, and the police department. And it's chaired by Todd Shimkus. And it was meant to establish better communication amongst the bars and the police department and work on safety and nightlife issues. And so they have met, I believe, twice. And they formed, I think, some subcommittees. Their goal is to continue to meet twice a year. And by all accounts, it's been very effective and productive. They talked about some of the topics they went through at the last meeting. There were a lot of questions, I guess, about best practices for searches when they have people coming into a bar or a club. They talked about how to deal with overserved or violent patrons, how to communicate these issues to the SSPD. They talked about SLA referrals because, of course, like when they have an issue at their bar or their establishment, they want to alert the police department, but they also don't want to get in trouble with the SLA and have it potentially affect their liquor license. So those were some of the things that came up. I'm sorry, you guys, sweet Jesus. My children are commenting. I have a chronic problem with the Dalton children commenting. Dalton children, stop watching this podcast. Anyway,
is this to your kids? I've met your kids, but come on, it's a beautiful day outside. Shouldn't you be? You're a block from Congress Park. Shouldn't you be out doing stuff?
I'm applauding the kid for being invested in the public center and the public square and what's going on in their city. So Dalton kids, good on you. Just don't repeat some of the words.
They're laughing hysterically right now.
No, sorry, I digress. I'm sorry, guys. One of the most interesting things, though, in this conversation, this update from the Downtown Advisory Committee, was an issue that was brought up of a proposed universal no trespass order, which Commissioner Moran said that they were looking into, which is essentially right now, if you have someone who becomes a problem at an establishment, a bar, a restaurant, whatever, that one establishment can file, a trespass order against that person. So if they come onto the property, they're in violation of the trespass order, they can call the police and they can be removed from the property. But what Commissioner Moran was proposing was a universal no trespass order. So if you come to Saratoga Springs, you create a problem downtown in one of our businesses, you can essentially be banned from all the businesses in Saratoga Springs. Like you're if you like step foot downtown or in any business, you're violating this universal no trespass and you're banned. Like he was like, if you're coming here to create problems, we don't want you here. And so this is something we're looking into because we would like oust you. And I thought that was,
yeah, in theory, actually, I don't hate the idea, but I think you're going to have a lot of due process issues, a lot of constitutional issues, or a lot of infringing on people's rights. So while the idea of just is of it seems as black and white of, hey, if somebody is a troublemaker, move on to ride your horse to the next city or town. It seems like a good one. I just don't see how this is a practical matter. But Dan, you're the lawyer and the former police officer. What are your thoughts?
Like you, I'm intrigued by it. I sort of like it in concept. I do see it being challenging. I won't say it's impossible. I'm happy they're looking into it. They need to do that. Sometimes it seems they come up with ideas from the hip here in the city, and they just start running with it without doing their due diligence and researching it. Seems like in this case they are researching it. But yeah, one of the key components to a trespass charge when it's a public place is they have to have notice. So if you have notice at Gaffney's, and they're going to come up with a system that says that also applies everywhere else, that person has to have notice, and I don't know if it'll fly. I don't, like you alluded to, Adam.
And how do you define everywhere else?
Pass legal muster. I'm sorry.
How do you define everywhere else? Right? Like when you not go to a gas station, you have to put what is everywhere else? So again, good in theory. If smarter minds think of the answers to our questions, I'd be interested to see what they come up with.
Yeah, because generally the owner or somebody in charge of the establishment, and we're talking multiple establishments in this case, right, has to communicate to the person somehow, some way that you're persona non grata here. If you enter, you will be charged with trespass. So I don't know if you can do that with a blanket effort, right? I don't know. I good for them for trying, and good for them for doing it the right way. I just don't know at this point.
I love the message of like, listen, we're not going to put up with your shit anymore. And so like, don't come here and think that you could just like come downtown and continue to cause like problems and chaos. However, I also think it's like actually bananas to say like, as a city, hey, if you come here and you create a problem downtown, we potentially have the ability to say, you're not allowed to come back here again and go to any of our establishments ever. Like, I think that's actually like nuts. Because, I mean, certainly, everyone can relate to an instance of going someplace, being overserved and acting like, excuse my language, an asshole. But then can you imagine if the ramification was like, you can never come back and enjoy anything in Saratoga Springs again? Like, I think that's actually kind of like cuckoo. Yeah.
It's like a Saratoga Springs no-fly list.
Well, it could be for a time period, right? It could be 6 months. It could be the track season, right? It could be a limited in scope.
Say you're here with your family. And like your brother does something like totally like messed up, and then he's not allowed to like go anywhere. I don't know. I just think it's like I don't know if it's a great look for. I don't know. I think it's a slippery slope. I don't know if it's a great idea. I don't know if I'm totally comfortable with that.
What I don't understand is, we think Saratoga is so unique, and it is overall. But the fact is, whether we're talking about Airbnb or this issue that we're talking about, other cities, other municipalities have already had these same issues. They've addressed it with homelessness. There's got to be templates out there for things that work, and that's part of the legal research, right? They were probably already challenged in court. They either the court threw them out or the court upheld the laws and the ordinances and so forth. And so there's got to be a wealth of information out there through the Conference of Mayors and other entities.
Yeah, and that's kind of what Commissioner Moran, he was contacting some, I can't quite remember, it was like an organization or some group that had done this or had expertise in this universal trespass concept. So that's what he was looking into and was going to give more information about. But the crux of the conversation with this Downtown Advisory Committee update was really that we don't have nearly enough police officers to handle the nightlife on the weekends in the summer. And it was just kind of like, I was listening to it and I'm like, it's almost like every council that gets elected in has to have this realization. And it takes them a long time. They get their feet wet, they get elected, they learn, a year and a half in, they have this realization that we don't have enough police officers to handle the downtown summer crowds. And it's like, no shit. Like how, like, yes, we know this, but nothing substantial is ever done about it in terms of increasing the number of police officers we have for the summer. And also, and instead, especially with this council, you have got Jim Montanino, who's like defunding positions and hasn't added any substantial numbers to the patrol officers, even though he said he was going to, he did not. And so I just feel like it's great that they're having these realizations, but like, what are you going to do about it? You know what I mean? We have to number. The only way to solve that problem is to add bodies. I mean, in my opinion, Dan, I mean, how else do you address this issue? You got to add bodies.
Yeah, because at some point overtime just doesn't work anymore. Everyone's burned out and sick and so forth. And and that needs to be a comprehensive approach that Jim Montanino has failed at, right? We've talked about that numerous times on here. Officers have retired, they've transferred out, they've left. And in some cases, you could say those were personal decisions having nothing to do with the department. And I would agree with that. But in some decisions, and perhaps many decisions, they were like, Johnny Paycheck, take this job and shove it. They got out of this department, with the dysfunctional leadership and beyond the chief, right? They've had good solid chiefs, or at least with Shane Crook. Well, good solid chiefs in recent times, and some of that is negative with some of the tinkering or upheaval that Jim Montanino caused in the department, chasing some veteran, well-liked, well-respected officers out.
Yeah, and I think you got to push beyond too. Just Commissioner Montanino. I think as a city, we've allowed our police officers to really be degraded, be called horrific things. Why would you want to become a police officer here when the second you join, you're now labeled racist just because you joined the Saratoga Springs PD? I just think as a community, we do not respect our police officers like we should have. We didn't address the police reform opportunity like we should have. And we've kind of lost a lot of good officers and the ability to hire new officers because of this condition, these working conditions and these environments that these men and women have to go through. Again, I'm not saying there's not room for reform, but the way we as a city addressed it did not, it just did not address real issues, more of blanket names and accusations against men and women who just show up every day for work and try to do the best they can do. So Jim certainly added to that, but I think as a city, we failed as well.
Well, to me, there's a ton of deep respect for our police department in the community. The problem is that deep respect isn't articulated publicly because we have this small activist group that will then engage with you publicly, if you are articulating that support in a really nasty.
Well, you have our mayor lying. You have our mayor or lying about that. Was it Ron Kim or Dylan Moran who said they were in riot gear?
I believe both of them.
It was both.
Right. So you have our city's leadership. And I'll give Dylan some credit with this universal trade. He does things I like and I don't like. I like this idea of looking into how can we make our streets safer. But again, I understand what he was trying to do. But when you're doing it at the expense of the morale of our police force by essentially mischaracterizing them of what they are and what they're doing, and I believe that's a big problem of why our police force is, even if we tried to throw money and positions at it, it wouldn't solve it.
Well, that's kind of where I was headed. Like, we have no one on the city council that expresses public support for the police department over the last year and a half. When, they were cutting the assistant chief position, no one fought back against that. No one stood up for that position. These things that have happened to the department, whether it's through Jim Montanino's leadership, whether it's through what the, Saratoga BLM is saying, whether it's what Ron Kim is saying, no one on that council stands up for the police department at all until very, very recently. Commissioner Moran, I think, is just now taking steps to try to support the police department and kind of turn things around a little bit. And I appreciate that. Jim Montanino is kind of trying to support the police department, but it's all a year and a half too late, in my opinion. And the damage has been done. And
can we talk about, while we're here, can we talk about Commissioner Gold? Because I thought he did a really solid move to kind of bridge the gap. There was a restorative justice board that was formed, and Commissioner Gola appointed a gentleman by the name of Daniel Mullen. I played Little League Baseball with him in Saratoga. His father was a police officer. His father was my DARE officer and a police officer. So he is a legacy police officer in this city, and somebody who I absolutely think you need both sides at the table to make changes. Do you guys agree?
And he's also the president of the PBA, I might add.
President of the PBA, right. Rob, if you want to fill in a little more background on this.
Sure.
But so, I thought this was such a stand-up move by Commissioner Golub.
So basically, we part of the 50-point police reform plan was to put together a restorative justice committee. And so all the city council members got to make an appointment to this restorative justice committee. Largely, the appointments have been more kind of progressive activist types, I think would be a fair assessment. And Commissioner Golub just made his appointment to this restorative justice committee. And the person he appointed was Sergeant Mullen, who's an SSPD, an active police officer in our department. He's been there for quite some time. He's an incredible police officer. He's contributed, immensely to our community. He's the president of the PBA. But it was a really bold and strong statement, I think, from Commissioner Golub to put someone from the police department on the restorative justice committee and make sure that law enforcement was represented in that process and on that group. And I also think it speaks volumes about Sergeant Mullen that he accepted the appointment and he was willing to do it, because there's a lot of friction between, the police reform plan and how that was, established and presented, and the police department. Understandably, I think that, a lot of things went wrong there. So I think it was a really strong move by Commissioner Golub. I think he'll probably get a lot of heat from Saratoga BLM over it. But I applaud him for doing it. And I applaud Sergeant Mullen for accepting the appointment.
If Commissioner Golub has been a statesman from what I've seen so far. Yeah. He's really sort of stood out as one. He's not. I haven't seen him sling mud, and this move is consistent with what he's done. And I'd like to see that continue. I'd like to see that continue with the old thing. I do have to say with Commissioner Moran, it was just a month ago where he said Lex Figueroa was thrown up against the wall when he was had to go in to be fingerprinted, and that was simply wrong. That was factually wrong, and it was proven wrong with video. So I'm still sort of bothered by that. That wasn't that long ago that he said that. I hope you're correct that he is turning the page. I think he believes he's supporting the police officer. I think he always believed that. I don't believe that, or I didn't believe that in the recent past. But I am open-minded. If that evolves and it changes, I hope I recognize it.
Yeah, agree. Well, I'm interested to see what the restorative justice this group does. I think it's a very esoteric concept, and I think it's going to take a lot of training. I'm kind of curious to see how it actually is executed, but conversation for another time. Speaking of Commissioner Moran, one of the other things that came up at the council meeting was his proposal for regulation of short-term rentals. And this is actually a very hot button issue in Saratoga Springs specifically, because as you both know, we have such a thriving rental market for the summer. So many people do rent their house for track season or have, I think one of the issues that I actually have is that in recent years, so many people have been buying properties that they're then renting out, actually not just for track season, but year round. And, in a lot of residential neighborhoods, you now see properties that have just become year round Airbnbs. And so there's been a huge push over the last couple of years, specifically coming from the Convention and Tourism Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce to regulate the rentals, the short-term rentals, because you don't pay taxes on them the way that the hotels and inns and B&Bs pay an occupancy tax. And so they'd like to see that playing field leveled. Although the way this is being presented is kind of more of a spin of, we should be regulating this for public safety reasons. Because people who are using Airbnb and doing these short-term rentals, they're not required to have the same kind of fire inspections. So we don't know, if there's egress. We don't know if there's smoke detectors. We don't know if they're, zoned and inspected and allowed to have as many guests as they're having, and so on and so forth. So Commissioner Moran is proposing that we start having kind of a registry of these short-term rentals, and that they start being inspected for those sorts of safety regulations and so forth. And I think this is going to be a tough one for Saratoga Springs. I'm not sure people are going to be thrilled about this, and potentially fees or taxes going along with it.
I'm glad, I just criticized Commissioner Moran. Let me compliment him. He has been forward thinking on some of these issues, whether it's outdoor dining and we have friends of this podcast that are against some of the things he did with outdoor dining. But he is thoughtful and forward thinking, and he addresses issues. He's not afraid to step into a gnarly issue. So I commend him for that.
Well,
Yeah, I was going to say and we, my family's both in the hotel business and the local Airbnb business. So I see it from both ends here, I guess. But I'm a big keep government out of my business kind of guy. With that being said, I think business has an obligation to regulate itself before government has to come in and regulate it. And I don't think that we're doing that with Airbnbs and the short-term rentals. I think it has the potential to change the landscape of our city. Like Robin, you said, what is it doing to property values now? That in one way, if you're a homeowner, you're like, great, my property value is going up. But in the meantime, we're losing any ability for somebody in a middle management job to come afford a home in our city, right? And middle management jobs covers a lot of different people in that salary range. So it does have the ability to change our city dramatically. I hope it's not a slippery slope to too much government oversight. I don't want to have to get my Airbnb inspected monthly and pay a fee every month. And, so it is a slippery slope, but I think it is, we need a step to start talking about it and figuring out how can we do this in a smart way that benefits the city as a whole.
Yeah, so when I began my term on the city council in like January 2020, this was issue that the city council kind of like almost like hazed me with. They were like, Robin, this is a problem. You look into it. And so I did. I started looking into it, and then COVID happened and so on and so forth. But one of the biggest issues was that there's really no way to figure out who's using Airbnb, like who's renting short term. So you have to have people basically just like volunteer and tell you voluntarily that they're using Airbnb or they're renting out short term.
Yeah, but can't you require the Airbnb to tell? I mean, I know some places where Airbnb collects the occupancy tax. I mean,
yes.
Easy, right?
So the only way you can do that is going through the county, because our city is too small to do it through Airbnb. Like the zip code 12866, you can't do it through the zip code. You can't do it through just the city. You'd have to do it through the county, and the county has no interest in working with us to do it through Airbnb. So the only other way to do it is to enlist a company that would essentially come in and pay people to like lurk around town and try to identify Airbnb houses by essentially like walking through the neighborhoods and like watching and spying to see if people are renting out short term, which is like, and then paying people per house that they identify, which I thought was like just not in the spirit of how we operate in Saratoga. Like I was like, that's we're not going to do that here. But then I also thought that these regulations, the first step should be that they should apply to people who are doing Airbnbs with non-owner occupied properties, because I think that's the biggest problem. Like people who are not the, people who have been renting out their own home for year after year, but people who are buying secondary and third or fourth properties and Airbnb-ing them all year round, So I thought that would be a good starting place. But again, there's no way to know who's doing it unless people volunteer that information themselves. So I don't know. It's kind of it's a tricky one. And I didn't hear Commissioner Moran identify how we would be starting this registry, like how he would be kind of addressing that specific issue.
Again, this is something that other cities must have been ahead of us on this because it's such a pervasive issue. I just came back from Narragansett, Rhode Island, and they have a similar issue there. And you guys touched on it. It's like, how can middle income afford? The market forces alone pushed out the middle income people of buying a house in the city. The Airbnb effect has just exacerbated that problem.
Yeah.
I keep hearing about the housing market is slow. I haven't, it's anecdotal on my part, but I haven't seen it in Saratoga Springs. The prices are astounding. The rent prices that they're getting for Airbnb are astounding. It is just Saratoga has no. It's like the sky's the limit.
Dan, I'll quote my father on this. He's been in the real estate market for over 40 years in the city. He'll say Saratoga will never, knock on wood, never devalue. Right? It might not create as much value as or it might stay flat or stagnant, but it'll never go down. And over 40 years, I've always seen that to be the case.
Well, I mean, to me, it makes perfect sense. Why? Because we have these kind of like natural boundaries that limit the inventory and limit our ability to grow outwards, right? So like you look at the east side and you've got the Northway right there. And so there's nowhere to go. You can't go up, you can't go out. And so the natural boundaries to limiting inventory make it the real estate market fundamentally,
You know what somebody told me too, and which makes a lot of sense about the success of Saratoga. I'll give a lot of credit to the people who came here, like my father in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and worked their butt off to change the city to the city it is now. But more so, Saratoga really is the jewel, or one of the few jewels of New York State, right? So New York State has a lot of old industrial cities that have fallen under tough times. But north of New York City, you have the Westchester area, and then you maybe have Hudson, which this is up and coming. But New York State does not have many desirable cities, and I know I'm leaving some out, and I apologize.
Maybe Ithaca.
But Saratoga really is a jewel in a large desert here.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I consider myself like a New York State girl. I went to Cornell in Ithaca. I grew up in New York City. We had a home in Long Island, and anyone who's traveled in New York State knows that this is so unusual for upstate New York to have a city that thrives the way Saratoga Springs, thrives. Speaking of that, however, on the other end of the spectrum, I want to talk quickly about our homelessness issue, and also specifically the homeless task force that Mayor Kim put together has made a recommendation on a property to build a navigation center, a code blue, and they just made this recommendation a week or so ago. And I don't know if you guys have been following these meetings, but they started off with something like 25 properties and narrowed it down, and finally narrowed it down to 3, and specifically voted on one that they're recommending to the council to purchase and build these various structures on. And the one they're recommending is it's like 3 acres that's on the intersection of Weibel and Lake Avenue, right before the Storts, on the, I think, south side of the street. Do you know what I'm talking about? That
next to the Northway, between the Northway and Stewart's, I think is
Correct.
what you're saying. And Robin, while you're talking, I have to go offline for a second because I was in beautiful shade when I started, and lo and behold, that changes, and I'm baking in the sun. So I'm going to keep on. I'm just going to adjust myself. You keep talking, and I will. I'll still be with you, but I'll be back on in a second.
No problem. So this is a 3-acre property that's listed for sale for $800,000. And do you know the one I'm talking about, Adam?
Yeah, I believe I do. Yep.
Yeah. So again, that's what they're going to be recommending as the property that we should build this navigation center and a code blue on, and so forth. What are your thoughts?
Is the county buy-in? I mean, has the county been involved in this?
So that's a really good question. I don't think the county has been involved. And I also am I'm the finances of it are what I'm kind of tripping up on, because they, one of the positives they thought about this property was that the value, 3 acres for $800,000. And I'm thinking, well, yes, but then you're going to have to build all the buildings. I mean, it seems like it's a serious investment. And then the negatives people had brought up were the distance from the middle of the city, and like, how are folks going to get there, which I think is a very valid concern. As of right now, CDTA doesn't have a bus stop on that route. Although they feel confident that they could get CDTA to put a bus stop on that stretch right there. But you can't really walk there from downtown. I suppose you could ride your bike, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
As I say, what's interesting about this? So, a little background. We talked about, I've been doing some work with the homeless
Yes.
with a new program I'm creating, and I'm working with Rise and Commissioner Golub called what am I thinking of?
Hope Rising.
No, that's not it. Why am I thinking of Team Hope? That's it, Team Hope. And so I've been to the homeless shelter that I guess it's temporary, the one over by Broadway there. I've spoken to some of the people there about hiring them. I've hired them. Anyway, where I'm going with this is in Ballston Spa. There, I hired one gentleman. In Ballston Spa, there is a facility there that is a transitional facility. Anyway, this guy is motivated. He gets from Ballston Spa to Saratoga every time when I need him. He figure out he gets on the bus and makes it all the way from Ballston Spa. Sometimes I tell him, listen, if you need a ride, tell me, because I understand the challenges you're facing. So I think a large portion of that, and this is not based on scientific fact, but a large portion of that the population is antisocial anyway, right? They're not going to the restaurants downtown. And the ones who are not antisocial, there are ways to you're not putting them on the moon. They're not in the core of the city, but they are close enough where, like you said, if they build that there, how hard is it to put a CDTA bus stop in there?
Right.
Or how it's not impossible. And this is the problem I have, is that the biggest problem I see cities face is when they put a core dense subsidized housing or facility like this in the core of the city. It has to be dissolved and diluted throughout the city, because if you put it in the center of the city, it's going to make a tough area in your downtown. So yeah. I listen, I know there's going to be homeowners there, because there's some nice neighborhoods in that area who are going to be opposed to this, and they're going to have their concerns heard. But I'm concerned about the financing. I hope the county's on board. I'm concerned about how does this not become how do we control who's coming to this homelessness shelter, right? I mean, is this the whole, anybody can show up at this and claim they're homeless. Yeah. How do we prevent that? But it is something I do believe we have to start, I'm glad we're moving forward talking about it, because like it or not, it's an issue our city is facing.
Yeah, I guess my question is, I'm curious about what the total projected cost is for the entire project. Like, okay, it's $800,000 for the land. How much is it going to cost to build these? I think it was 3 buildings on that property. I'm just wondering what the all-in cost is going to be. And then there's the operational cost, because to me, it sounds like it's going to be like a multi-million-dollar situation. And then, I do think it's extremely important that we have buy-in from the county in terms of how it's being financed. I do think, though, it's a good location. I really do. I think it's probably the best location I've heard of in all of our conversations about where a Code Blue should go in particular.
It checks a lot of the boxes, right?
Yeah.
Not all of them. There's no such thing as a perfect location, right?
Yeah.
But in this city, that was a difficult task to get a location that checks so many of the boxes. There's no neighbors there that I can tell of, at least, obviously on the other side of the Northway. I don't want to diminish any concerns.
But that's a pretty solid buffer.
Yeah, exactly. There's no immediate neighbors there. And
I think that's close enough to those neighborhoods where there's going to be a big opposition.
I don't know if Swartz is going to love it, to be honest with you. But I think it's far enough away from the neighbors. I think there's a decent enough.
You know what?
You've been a good corporate citizen. I bet.
God bless Storts. They do a lot of good, but no matter where you build it, there's going to be a Storts near it. So
that's true.
Every location
exactly.
was 2 doors away from a Stewart's.
Yeah.
I commend the people that volunteered their time for this task force. These are unpaid jobs. So thank you, folks. And I don't even know. Robin, you probably know. Adam, you probably know some of the people. I didn't even look for it. Tom Ruin was at an earlier with the task force and so forth, and he had a lot of people with him. So I commend those that were on this task force.
Well, Robin, I mean, these numbers remind me of the third station. So the third station, the fire station, right? I mean, did that come out of Saratoga's pocket? The cost of the land?
The land is actually leased for like $1 or something from NYRA for like we have like 100-year lease from NYRA. So no, there was no major cost in acquiring.
Okay, so that 800. All right, so that money was saved, and then Saratoga foot the bill for the construction, correct?
We bonded it. Mm-hmm.
We've bonded out. Okay, so and then there's some controversy within staffing it, because we have a 3-year grant to hire firefighters.
Correct.
For it, but that only goes for 3 years, and then as a city we're obligated to keep the firefighters.
However, the one thing about the firehouse is that the ambulances are huge revenue generators. So it's actually a revenue generating department as well.
Yeah.
And I'm not as concerned about that grant. I sort of flipped that conversation. It's like, wait a minute, that was the cost of doing business. We had to pay for firefighters anyway to serve the Eastern Plateau, but we're actually getting a grant to cover it for 3 years. Yeah, the grant ends. Maybe there'll be new grants. I don't know. But either way, that's 3 years that we would have had to pay for anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as we have someone who's doing like responsible financial planning, I don't see why it's such a big deal. I think it's all you have to do is plan, right? I mean, Adam, you're my finance guy. If you have a grant, you know when it's going to end. You manage the budget accordingly, correct?
Yeah, it was. Well, yes and no. So I think what Commissioner Shangvi has proposed is some forward-thinking budgeting, because really your budget you just do for the next year. That's all the charter really requires. That's all you're looking at, minus any bonding you do years out. So and with the short term, with 2-year terms, you could promise all these things now, and then you don't have to worry about it. The next commissioner of finance has to worry about it. So there is some forward looking that the city has done and is trying to do, and the city will work it out. But to answer your question, the budgeting is only done for the next year.
Right. And I think I appreciated Commissioner Songby talking about the need for longer term kind of financial planning. That's kind of a continual project, regardless of who's in the commissioner position. And I would hope that I'm spacing on that, but there's a director position in the finance department. And I would assume that that's something that's happening just generally as a departmental function. I can't imagine that no one's thinking about longer term planning more than a year out in terms of running city finances. But
right, yeah.
Yes. Let's see. We've had 2 comments here. Mary says people in affordable housing contribute to the local economy. Yep, I quite agree, and we appreciate that. She also has asked, is it the old Crystal Spa? I don't know where the old Crystal Spa is, so I don't know.
That's South Broadway.
So I think the old Crystal Spa is where they are going to put Code Blue.
Code Blue as run by Shelters of Saratoga.
Yes. So where the low barrier homeless shelter is now was Code Blue. It will be there this winter. It's cut down the beds like in half or 3 or a quarter or something. So there's less beds there, and they're already full now. So Code Blue, this winter we need some place for the homeless who are not in the shelter when it gets cold. So the Crystal Spa that has it's like a motel with a spa in the center, South Broadway. That is where it's proposed to have the next Code Blue.
Yes.
Is it the place next door, the Grand Union?
I think it's the Grand Union, actually. I think it's the Grand Union.
Or are they one of the same? I lose track because that area, all the hotels have closed up in that little stretch there.
It's all I know is that Shelters of Saratoga has acquired that. I think it's the old Grand Union property, but they're putting different barriers of housing there. So they'll have, I believe, a Code Blue, but then they'll also have, I think, more transitional housing as well. So, in its totality, we're looking at a lot of different resources for the unhoused population in Saratoga Springs, between what Rise is doing on Adelphi Street, between the Walworth property that Shelters of Saratoga is already running, between the proposed new property that they're going to be building at the Grand Union, between this other property that they're talking about doing, on Weibel and Lake. I mean, we're talking about a significant amount of housing and resources.
Right. But is it a never-ending flow? Is the challenge?
Yeah, I don't know. The only thing I will say that I don't mean to sound like jaded and kind of critical, but when the Adelphi Street homeless shelter opened through Rise, there were a lot of people in one particular political party who were posting pictures of the Woodlawn Garage and, no vagrancy at the Woodlawn Garage as proof positive that the Adelphi shelter had worked and we had solved the vagrancy and the homeless crisis downtown. Because look, there's no one at the Woodlawn Garage. It's so clean and perfect. We don't see any homeless people there anymore. And I just thought that was premature. And I also thought it kind of undermined the entire purpose of a shelter, which to me, it just made it seem like the shelter was just to move people out of sight, out of mind. And I have to say, I've driven by the Woodlawn Garage a lot. It's, kind of part of my daily route. There are, fully people back there as expected. And it just goes to show that solving this kind of issue, addressing this kind of issue is not just as easy as opening one no barrier shelter. It's complicated, it's nuanced, and there are always going to be some population here of people who are unhoused or choosing to live a life of vagrancy. That's just the reality of life.
Well stated.
Yeah, and there's a West Avenue too that there's an underground here that is something that is a challenge that our city is everybody's trying to address it in different ways, but it is a challenge our city's facing.
Yes. Yeah. Although on the positive side, I just wanted to, again, highlight, Adam, what you're doing and what Commissioner Golub is doing, because it's pretty amazing. Commissioner Golub has developed a program with the Department of Public Works that's offering part-time employment for the folks who are staying at the Adelphi Street shelter to start giving them a path to permanent employment. And so I think they have currently four part-time employees who are working through DPW. And you, Adam, also have started a similar program. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I met with Commissioner Golub a while back. He had put out a call for anybody looking to hire. He was at the shelter and said, listen, there's some people here looking for jobs. If any private business wants to hire them. I was looking for a job. My dream was to go back and work for a company doing what I did in Ukraine and Poland, but nobody wanted me. So I rolled up my sleeves and said, okay, what can I do around here that's worthwhile? And I was painting buildings for my father, and I thought, hey, listen, this is something that if I can get more people, maybe there's a business here. And at the same time, Commissioner Golub put out a call for people to hire, people who are residents of the shelter. And I thought, boy, this is a population that I can work with if they're willing and able. So I met with some RISE people. We put together a plan. I met, like I said, with Commissioner Golub. So our two programs are working together. So the idea would be he's almost using DPW as a vetting and a trading course to have people work there for the summer, doing seasonal jobs, but get them back to the working life, and then having private businesses like mine that is a for-profit business, but now say, all right, we can. These people have worked for DPW. They've shown that they're showing up for work. They're doing a good job. Certainly, we understand there's challenges, but there's challenges with every employee. So and it's so far I'm absolutely amazed, and me as kind of a more of a conservative, right-leaning rhino Republican, but I'm amazed with at least the one gentleman really stepped up and wanted to get to work, and I'm having a great time working with him. I'm learning a lot about our population, our homeless population. He's been in homelessness for over 17 years, and his father is in the homeless population too in the city, right? So he has been in shelters for a long time, and he knows that culture. But boy, he shows up and he's really honest with me, and he tells me his struggles, and we work with him and his PO and whatnot. So anyway, it's a drop in the bucket, but it's a start. So anyway, thank you, Robin, for pointing it out. We're excited about it, and there's going to be more to come with Team Hope.
This is news to me, Adam. Congratulations. I didn't know that. Wow. Good for you. Well done.
I think that's just so incredible, because I cannot imagine. I mean, just getting a job in general is tough. Just it is. You have to have your shit together. You got to be organized. And if you don't have a place to live, to be able to get yourself together, to have what's necessary, to show up, to try to get a job, I just think the barriers to doing that are so immense. And the likelihood of your being employed is, slim without people understanding your situation. And so I just think this opportunity is fantastic. And I think it's really going to provide such a meaningful support system to getting people into a more consistent and housed and supported lifestyle, Yeah.
One last thing I'll say is, so what we're doing is we've kind of built this to go, and we're doing things, and we're looking for contracts to do landscaping and painting. The two are two kind of not core values, but our core competencies that I think we do, and we can do well. But one thing, when I gave the talk at the shelter, I told people, I said, listen, there's an option here for us to do a background check on you. And I said, I strongly suggest that you let us do this background check for two reasons. One, because if and when you leave us and go to work for somebody else, you want to know what's going to come up there. And I, as an employer, can address that with you and go over the challenges and how an employer sees it. The second thing is that I can then go to potential clients and say, hey, listen, there's confidentiality, but I can tell you what we're not, right? I can tell you what the comfort level I feel after seeing the background checks of the people we employ, and this is people who one of our first jobs was cleaning, not one of our first jobs, because there was a time of comfort level, and we cleaned out some garages and got a home base, but cleaning out my own home, right? So we've gone to my own home. We've done the work around my house, my children and my wife around, and that's something I feel comfortable in because I've seen their background check, and they were comfortable with that. So that's just a little. If anybody's looking to get their something painted or something mulched or mowed, reach out to us through the show, and we'll be happy to come out and give you a bid.
Wait, that's really, really interesting though, what you just brought up about the background checks, because I could see, it's such a good way to kind of like look at it, because most of the time you hear about a background check and it's kind of like a punitive thing. It's like a way to not hire someone. We want to background check you to make sure there's nothing, in your background that's going to prevent us from hiring you. And you're using it as a tool to actually help them overcome anything that might be in their background and almost turn it into like, okay, let's get over this barrier for now and in the future for any other employment. And I just think that's awesome. I think
that came out with working with Rise, right? Because I don't know, I know how to run a business, but not how to necessarily deal with somebody who's facing the challenges of homelessness. And so we worked together with Rise to kind of develop this program of an employee. The job is employee centered and focused as opposed to the employer, right? So we work around that. Listen, their health, their recovery is the most important thing. So we talk to parole officers or probation officers. I never knew there's a difference. There's a difference. If they have treatment they have to get to, that is a absolute valid reason to not come in, to clock out, to give them a ride there. So this job is based around the employee and their recovery. And I honestly, I think it'll be a solid business model, because I believe it'll benefit the employee, and we'll get a lot more done. So anyway, check us out. There'll be more coming soon. We're about to do the big drop and release. So Team Hope will be all over social media, and you can comment or reach out to us here.
That's awesome. Well, one more really quick thing, guys, because I know we're running out of time, but one thing that I would encourage people to go listen to, because it's been happening and I don't think people have been really had a lot of eyes on it. The Civilian Review Board that was created by Commissioner Montanino and the City Council has been meeting. You can watch the videos online of the meetings. They just passed their policies and procedures. They weren't attached to the agenda though, and they weren't discussed. So I don't know what they are. I reached out to Kristen Dart, who's the chair of the Civilian Review Board, and asked her if those could be shared with the public, because I'm just curious as to how this is going to run exactly and kind of the nuts and bolts of it. But I'll keep you guys apprised of how it's developed and how, I think they are anticipating that they'll be able to start taking complaints by the end of the summer. So I just think this is an important one for us to keep our eye on and keep people updated about.
Yeah, I'd like to see that document as well. We could foil it, I guess, but hopefully they just offer it up.
Yeah, she was surprised that it wasn't attached to the agenda online. So I think, I don't think they're going to have any problem providing it. I'd be kind of shocked if I had to foil it.
And a quick point, just go back, we had 2 commenters, right? I just want to thank those people for writing in with the comments.
Yes.
Back 5 minutes ago.
Yes.
But for Robin, back to your point, I'm glad you're bringing this forward, because certain things get forgotten about in the city, and if you're not watching if you're not at the city hall meetings or city council meetings or watching them, some things aren't reported. Maybe it was reported in the press, but I didn't catch it.
I've been watching all the meetings, guys. I'm all over all the meetings. I'll save this for the next podcast, but the other meetings I've been watching have been the Civil Service Commission meetings, which sounds so boring, right? It is chock full of very interesting information. And in the next podcast, I'll get into it some more, because I was kind of shocked at some of the things I was hearing. And I think this also makes me like the geekiest person in Saratoga Springs, because I am listening to all these meetings at home, but they're important, guys. They're important. A lot of stuff happens at these meetings that no one's paying attention to. And so that's our little job here, right? To bring it to the public.
Yeah, I thought you were going to tell us it was chock full of drama. Then I'm like, okay, I'll be watching.
They are kind of chock full of drama. That's the thing. I'm like listening to them and they're kind of like blowing my mind. So Anyway, I know we only have a few minutes, so I want to skip to one other just really kind of silly thing, but I had to ask you guys about it before we ended. All right. I put a Facebook post up, 2 Saturday nights ago or something like that. I was driving back home. I was driving down Caroline Street. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And I just observed that there were a lot of bros out, like bros. To me, that's like a really commonly used term, bros. When I say bros, I mean, like a lot of like white, younger, like early 20 something bros, like frat guys, bros. Okay, I put this on Facebook. People did not know what to make of it. I think the implication was that like maybe I was saying bros like brothers from the hood. Like people, they were offended. They didn't think I should use the term bros. I was shocked. I thought everybody kind of knew what bros meant, what that reference was to. And I just wanted to ask my resident bro, Adam Israel, what he thought. Dan, if you know what the term bro means and what demographic it refers to, or if you think it's offensive.
Adam, you want to go?
Yeah, for bros for me is like everything that's right with toxic masculinity. It's just it is. It's just doing guys things. Sundays are for the boy, or Saturdays are for the boys. Watching football. I have no problem with bros. I don't know why people were offended by it. Again, the only thing I can think of is that bro in some progressive left's mind might be associated with toxic masculinity, but it's just for me, it's just the bros. That's what we did when I was younger. I call myself a bro pa now. I've graduated out of it, but you better believe when I was in my 20s and early 30s, every Friday and Saturday, and probably most Wednesdays and Thursdays, I was on Caroline Street and just doing bro things. So it was, for me, it was just funny that people took offense. And again, like you, Robert, I could not figure out where the offense was, right? Maybe it was, maybe they thought you were being racist. Maybe they thought you were sensationalizing toxic masculinity, but don't take my brodom from me. Come on, left. Let me have it.
I mean, I was like, it was one of those moments where I was like, screw it. I'm not backing down. This is not 2020, people. I'm not backing off my bro statement and adjusting, this post.
Yeah, I didn't see the post, Robin, so I don't have the direct knowledge other than what you just said here. What do you know the sources of the specific people, or who was criticizing you?
It was just random people commenting, being like, you might want to rephrase that. Blah, blah, blah,
the left, Dan, the far left, who gets the outrage squad.
Yeah, Adam, thank you for your insight. I don't have too much to offer here. I guess because of paranoia, I probably wouldn't use that word in case I'm offending somebody. I don't see it. But what if I'm wrong, right? So I probably wouldn't use that term.
But if I said
I don't want to inadvertently make a mistake, and that's what this we've come to, right?
But Dan, if I say to you like, oh yeah, there were a ton of bros there, like, would you know what I was talking about?
No, not exactly. I mean, I just
all right.
I'm the oldest of the three. Maybe I'm out of touch.
Yeah, the bros. Yeah, the bros really came to light in the early to mid '90s. Dan, I think probably you were out of the bro prime then, so could be it.
He's the
Dan, we'll bro out sometime. I'll show you what it is.
He's the grand bro pa.
The bro pa.
Bro pa.
No, now it's time for my kids to interrupt. I got them pounding on a window in our backyard trying to get my attention.
All right. Well, listen. Let's do our cheers and jeers before we wrap up.
Wait, can we do Chick-fil-A?
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Let's do crazy. Is that how you spell it, guys? Is it Chick-fil-A? Is it Chick-fil-A? I don't freaking know.
I don't know either.
I think it's CHIK-FIL-A, capital A.
Okay, so I did do it right. All
yeah,
right,
I think you're just about right. There may be a K in the C. I can't remember.
So anyway. Crazy for Chick-fil-A, guys. The Chick-fil-A madness has begun. It opened in Clifton Park. I did also share a post. I'm just getting in trouble on Facebook right and left. So I shared a post on Facebook about Chick-fil-A that basically, to me, the essence of the post was that the guy's post that I shared essentially said he wished the same level of enthusiasm.
No, he said, I dream of a world where.
Okay, all right, I'll read it. It said, I dream of a region in Albany where people do not celebrate the opening of a fast food chain, but stand in line for the latest downtown restaurant where the team has hustled for years to perfect their product, not bought the recipe of frozen chicken from a mega corporation. I dream of a region in Albany that celebrates the aplomb, the opening of any retail where parking has not murdered the experience. A place that does not care even a second about a new megastore that has opened at the mall, a store selling discount clothes made everywhere but here and sure to leave in 3 years when the fanfare has died down. It was not a fantastic week for that shop local / eat local crowd. We remain the overwhelming minority here, but more and more see the ridiculousness, and that's a good thing. all around the country, people are getting it right. We can too.
It was very thoughtful. I appreciated the depth of what that person wrote. I don't hate the chains. I don't want to see too many downtown. I think, some chains, whether they're retail or restaurants, where they are now, they're not offensive. I think they help support the core. You can't have all independent retail downtown. I don't think that makes for a strong downtown. But I love the thoughtfulness of that, the depth. It forces you to think. But I'm not against any store in the mall. I'm happy when a store opens in the mall because our mall is hurting. By.
What is it about Chick-fil-A that makes people go fucking bananas? Like,
you know
there's
what
something about
this is what I think is about Chick-fil-A, and I'll get back to you why I think that post is ridiculous. But Chick-fil-A did have some anti kind of homophobic beliefs and value systems, and supported organizations. And I don't know too much about it, and I should know more. But they did. I mean, they did support organizations that were against gay marriage.
Correct.
And so they've since, I think, kind of done a 180 on that. That's the kind of, and so I think they already, you say Chick-fil-A and a lot of people on the left already have a very negative connotation to it, right? And so that's kind of my issue. And my issue with this post is that it is the hypocrisy of, and I see it on the far left. I'm sure the far right does it too, but on the local on the far left, is that like these are the same people who go crazy for the bar movie and never been to the Spot Little Theater. These are the same people who will go see, they'll go crazy for Dead and Company, but won't go to Cafe. Don't spend any money at Cafe, or maybe they do spend money at Cafe Lena. But it's okay to be crazy about Dead and Company coming, and then it's okay to go to Cafe Lena, and it's okay to be both. If you go see Barbie, you're giving money to millionaires and billionaires. Same thing at Dead and Company, you're just giving money to a lot of millionaires. So be it, though. You need a balance in life, and for I dream of a chicken sandwich that's not made at a fast food restaurant. For me, it's just virtue signaling, and it's just going over the top, and it's the polarization that people be excited about a silly restaurant that's coming up here. I mean, I remember Boston Market came here. People were lining down Broadway to get a chicken sandwich. It's gone now, but it's so be it.
But it's like not excitement. It's like a frenzy of, for Christ's sake, I went to the Chick-fil-A Clifton Park Facebook page, right? And there's a video of like the manager before it opened saying like, it's a very serious. And he's like, our highest priority as we open our Chick-fil-A is public safety. And therefore we've worked with the local police department to recommend suggested routes as to how to drive here on opening day. And it literally goes through like how to drive there safely on opening day. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, cars lining up at 5:30 in the morning. Like and then it's like, and then the next post was like, please do not park in the Olive Garden parking lot. Like, please, like, it's like pandemonium. I'm like, is there crack cocaine in these chicken sandwiches?
Yeah, it's got a bit of a cult following, right? Chick-fil-A, as do other certain retail, and Doughboys had their cult following as well. I had friends coming from Buffalo. Doughboys, man, Doughboys. Well, aren't we going to the races? No, Doughboys. So
I think it's much marketing than anything else,
kid that drove
right? Like, don't get me wrong. I've already had my Chick-fil-A sandwich and it was delicious, but I checked that. I'm good for one a year.
I know a kid that drove to Plattsburgh from Saratoga, got a ticket on the way before there were Chick-fil-A's down this way. It's got an allure. And to your point, Adam, let him do it. I'm sorry?
Did you ever see the movie Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle?
Yeah. Dude, why don't, speaking of which,
there you go, man. White Castle, like those guys went to the ends of the earth to get those White Castle burgers. Sometimes you just want fast food,
the
sliders. We should have a White Castle. We should have a White Castle. I will always assert that. And when I moved here, I actually looked to see if there was any White Castle franchise opportunities, and they were not offering any franchise opportunities at this time.
Yeah, it's just two stoner college kids go on an adventure to get White Castle, and it's a comedy. It's funny.
Yeah, it actually is really funny.
Hey, I gotta jump off. I got my track gear on. I'm taking my daughter. I'm going with my father and his wife. So we're gonna go see some ponies run.
Okay.
So
okay. Do you have a quick cheer, or do you have to bounce?
No, I'm bouncing. I'm out.
Okay. Bounce out.
I'm gonna go home and see the King of Bros, Dave Portnoy. I hope I see him. Be like a little school going, hey, Dave, love that guy. Let's go for the track. All right, guys.
All right, over and out. Bye.
Back together.
Dan, do you have a cheer and jeer you can share with us?
I've got a couple of cheers. One of them centered around something Adam's doing, so I'm going to save it for next week. So I'll go with my first cheer. And I'm going to make it general, then specific. There are a ton of charity galas going on this summer. I think more than ever in past years. Saratoga's always been a place for that during the summer, supporting so many different worthy causes. But this summer, it's over the top. And I'm going to give a specific accolade to the one Therapeutic Horses of Saratoga had at Sugar Plum Farm. They had a casino night and gala there 2 Saturdays ago. Sugar Plum Farm, folks, is the farm across from Saratoga National at the corner of Gilbert and Union. It's like right out of Kentucky.
Yeah,
it is
beautiful.
gorgeous. And I have a strong relationship with Therapeutic Horses of Saratoga with Dr. Aaron Christopher Sisk and Meg Kolaski. And I regret that I could not be there that night because I was out of town. But I just want to commend them. Arthur Gonick, our friend from the 12866 blog, called it the Rookie Gala of the Year. It sounded like it was that good. And there's so many. I don't want to shortchange the others, but that is the one this year that I wish I could have made. So I commend all of these people donating their time for these great causes, some centering around people, some centering around horses and other things. So I commend them all with a special shout out to Therapeutic Horses of Saratoga for their great inaugural gala.
Yeah, that's awesome. As you know, my former job used to be covering all the society events, all the galas, all the parties. And so I'm well aware of how many there are. And I was always just so astounded and inspired that at every event I went to, there were always people showing up and giving again and again and again. And it was just so awesome. I just think it speaks volumes about our community and the people that come here. And I think it's one of the most incredible things about Saratoga Springs.
Yes, thank you for mentioning the givers, right? They show up for $200, $250 a pop, but they don't stop paying, right? There's auctions, there's this, there's that, there's 50-50. And you can walk out of there. I'm sure there's people that walk out of those places spending well over $1,000.
Oh God, yeah, totally. And it's different people every time, and the stories you hear and the causes and the reasons people are having these events are always so inspirational and always so moving. And there are so many, and sometimes I would just be exhausted. I wouldn't want to go out. I'd be pregnant. I got all these kids at home. And every time I would get myself out, I'd go to cover these events, and I would be so happy that I did, because I would always leave having met someone who I just found incredibly inspiring, or having heard something that was so inspiring. And I was just so thankful that I had the opportunity to go and witness, again, another act of incredible philanthropy.
Wow, that's great. I forgot how much experience you have attending those galas. That was exactly your focus, right?
A lot of years, yeah. Yeah. So any cheer?
No, I had 2 cheers. I'm going to save my Adam cheer for when Adam is on next week.
Well, I've got a quick cheer and a quick cheer. My quick cheer is actually to the 2 ladies in our parking enforcement division. I just saw them on the way up here, and they are so awesome. And they have such a tough job, especially in the summer. There's all these cars parked on Caroline Street right now where there's not supposed to be any cars parked. They have to get out and ticket people, and people yell at them and treat them like such garbage because they don't want to get ticket. They're mad, but they're parked illegally, and you can't park illegally. And so, they get so much heat from people for just doing their job. And they do it so well, and they're so kind and lovely. And so I just wanted to cheer them for keeping our streets clear and safe, so that emergency vehicles can pass through and people don't park where they're not supposed to be parked. So I just wanted to give them a quick cheer. My cheer for the week is I'm getting a little overwhelmed with the smell of pot walking around outside. It is everywhere, and it's a lot. And I also was at the track, was it last week or 2 weekends ago? And I was with my kids, and my 7-year-old was like holding his breath the whole time because the cigars, the cigarettes, and the smell of pot was so heavy walking around. It was a lot. It was a lot. And so I know there's someone in Albany there's some lawmaker who's proposing some kind of restriction, I think in New York City, for smoking pot outside, just because, especially in Manhattan, it's just like, again, the smell of pot is just like everywhere. And so I just kind of wanted to, I don't really know the answer, but it kind of sucks. And I just wanted to jeer it in general. I don't know what your thoughts are, Dan, but
Oh yeah, at times, especially with kids, it's pervasive, right? It's places
Yeah.
you wouldn't expect it to be. Even just wait till the dispensary comes over on West Avenue. We'll have to talk about that next week.
I know. So is that correct? There's one coming on West Avenue?
Yes, right where near the Family Dollar, that same strip mall. So we'll have to follow up on that next week. But yeah, there's times when, and there's times when if it's just me and I'm in a place where I just expect, okay, I let it, it doesn't bother me. But especially when I'm with my kids and it's a place you just wouldn't expect to do it, it is offensive.
It is. I totally agree. Anyway, well, it was great to see you both. We'll be back, I think, next Wednesday. I know our summertime schedule's been a little all over the place, but we'll get back to a more consistent schedule post-August, I think. But it was great to see you, Dan.
It was great seeing you. I hope we do get back to a schedule. Excellent.
All right. Over and out, my friend.
Thank you.
Bye.